starting. You'll see it on your screen for those of you who are tuned in. Okay, just make sure you click got it. So last week we had a discussion about much of our discussion centered around the topic of Tosefes Shabbos, about the idea that there is a mitzvah, positive mitzvah. Many hold that is a deoraisa, to be mosif mechol al hakodesh, to add from a little bit from the weekdays to from the mundane to the holy. And this is the idea of starting Shabbos a little bit early. Obviously, if a person is lighting candles, any amount of time earlier, that should be, and they're starting Shabbos at that point, that should be a fulfillment in Tosefes Shabbos. In theory, even just adding a few minutes should be that. And we talked about that there are different minhagim around the world where different amounts are added to Shabbos. So we talked last week about the minhag in Yerushalayim of lighting candles 40 minutes prior to sunset. This all really stems from the idea, I believe, of Tosefes Shabbos. I'm sure there's actually more to that than I realized, though. I don't know how ancient that minhag is in Yerushalayim of 40 minutes, but that's what we talked about, and I think that in that context, we mentioned that the Rambam was not necessarily in lockstep about it being a deoraisa to have Tosefes Shabbos. The Rambam seems to say it's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan when it comes to Shabbos. And the Rambam only really mentions, the Rambam only mentions the idea of Tosefes, of this addition, when it comes to Yom HaKippurim le'inyan inui bilvad, but it's simply when it comes to the fasting that is occurring on Yom Kippur. There he mentions the idea of Hilchot Yom HaKippurim. And the reason is because the whole discussion in the Sugya, in the Gemara, really centers around Yom Kippur. Many others make the connection of Shabbos, because Yom Kippur is Shabbat, Shabbaton, described in the Torah, and Shabbos every week is called Shabbos. So therefore, one can learn from the other. The Rambam felt that was not necessarily a deoraisa part. That part was not a deoraisa to learn from that.
Where is the deoraisa? It's the Greek reference to Shabbat.
So that would be the Rambam's point. It's not explicit. Meaning the whole idea by Yom Kippur is learned from the fact that it says Tisha ba'erev me'erev ad erev tishbetu shabbaschem, that from the 9th in the evening you shall afflict yourself. From erev to erev, from eve to eve, it should be tishbetu shabbaschem. It should be a Shabbos for you. And so the funny language of the 9th, when of course Yom Kippur is the 10th, and saying the 9th and the evening, from evening to evening, teaches you that the Torah should Baal Peh on this one is that you start the fast a little bit on the 9th of Tishrei, and then it should last until the following evening, a little bit past the 10th. And I went back actually after last week's shir, and I went back to Parsha Emor. Take a look, by the way, even the description in the previous paragraph in Emor of Rosh Hashanah. It just says on the 7th month, on this day. It is a very odd formulation that the Torah describes Yom Kippur as taking place on the 9th in the eve. Because Rosh Hashanah also starts at night, by the way. All the holidays start at night. So for it to start in such a fashion, in terms of the description of the date, was, needed some Torah Shabbal Peh explanation. And that was the drasha that Chazal had on how to understand it. So that's where it comes from. But of course, the context is Yom Kippur. The question is that can you transpose that to Shabbos? Others say the answer is yes. Many say the answer is yes, because it says Tishbetu Shabbaschem, that you should rest on your Sabbath, and therefore anywhere where it says Shabbos, you should apply this rule, which is why that there is a idea of every Shabbos and Yom Tov there is Tosefes. The Rambam again, he said that he didn't feel that the extension to Shabbos and Yom Tov is a deoraisa, He didn't say anything, by the way, the truth is. That many claim in his name that he would agree, though, that it's a derabanan by Shabbos and Yom Tov. Again, really, in reality, we're talking about mere minutes here of something added. Okay. But yeah, a whole list of them from the Bahag, the Rif, the Rush, the Smag, the Smak, the Uraim, the Ran, the Magid Mishnah, all say that Tosefes Shabbos is a Torah concept, not a rabbinic concept. So, that's the it was learned by originally, so its original source is Yom Kippur, but because there's Tish Betu Shabbaschem in the same pasuk, Shabbaschem. So all your Shabboses, not just this Shabbos of Yom Kippur, which would include Yom Tov, because of course there's there it also describes a resting from Malacha. Yeah.
Shabbat only means Shabbat for you plural. It doesn't mean all
For
your Shabbats.
you plural, right?
It doesn't mean all your Shabbatot.
Tish Betu, right? Shabbat.
Otherwise, it would say Shabbatotchem or something like that.
Yeah. Maybe the Rambam, but the same way. Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting. Anyways, it's an interesting, limud, but that's how we get to that. Okay, so that was what we spent a good chunk last week discussing, and I actually want to learn. I think this is probably all we're going to learn today, which is two lengthy passages in the Be'ur Halacha. One will actually review what we just talked about now, but before we do that, we have to get a little more context. So we're going to go to the later Be'er Halacha, and then we'll go backwards. So last week we said, if you go back to the Shulchan Aruch for a second, it's on page Lamed Gimel in my edition, top line, Uzman Tosefes, what is the time frame of this edition? Uzman Tosefes Zehu Mitchilas Hashkia, from the beginning of Shkia, She'en Hashemesh Nires al Haaretz, when the sun disappears from the is not visible from the earth, on the earth, excuse me, Ad Arshe on the land, Ad Zman Bein Hashmashos, until the time that Bein Hashmashos begins, that twilight begins. Vizman Hazman Hazeh, and that time frame, Shehu Shlosha Milin Urevia, the time from beginning of Shkia, when the sun is no longer visible, to the time of Bein Hashmashos, which is when you have the possibility of adding to Shabbos, is 3¼ meal. We usually estimate a meal to be 18 minutes. So you'll do the math. It would be 18 times 3 plus 1/4 times 18. So you're talking about something around 50. There you go, 58.5 minutes. Richie with the quick math. 58.5 minutes. So Ratza la'asoso kulo tosefes ose. You want to make the whole entire period of between Tchilas Shkia and Bein Hashmashos Tosefes Shabbos? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's crazy.
This is from Shkia.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's not what we do. Yeah.
Yes, if you light candles, at that point, that's when you're accepting Shabbos. As long as you have that, don't have in mind not to accept Shabbos, yes, that would be the time. So here we're describing from. Yes. If you're accepting Shabbos at that point, yes, of course. Yeah, we have for sure be able to implement Shabbos. What happens if you're maybe like me? As Chata'anim as Karyom said the baker, and so I admit as well that sometimes I'm still doing things in the 18 minutes. I didn't accept Shabbos. As long as I have something, technically it's a kiyum in Tosefes Shabbos. Yeah.
But from Shkia, it is a Tosefes Shabbos. So you Shkia is Shabbos.
Good.
Yes.
So we're gonna talk. So Shkia.
See,
So this gives you 58 minutes after Shkia. So he sounds like, oh, well, you should do Tosefes, or you can do Tosefes at that point. So practically speaking, there's no difference in my life because I'm keeping Shabbos at that point. But hold on, Richie, this will get more interesting in a second. So he says, so you want to do the whole thing Shabbos? Good. Ratza, turn the page. Ratza lasos v'nu miktas. You want some of it only? Ose. So it's fine. Keep doing your malacha after Shkia, and you'll do malacha, and you'll stop at some point before Bein Hashmashos, and then Uvilvad sheyosif eis esman sheyer v'adayom mechol alakol. As long as you're adding something from day to holy, from mundane to holy, you're good to go. V'shir zman bein hashmashos, and how long is bein hashmashos? Hu shloshes rivei meal. Bein hashmashos is 3/4 of a meal. Shehei mahalach elef v'chamesh me'os amos, which is the distance it would take you to walk 1,500 amos. Kodem halayla, before the night. Now, let's pause right there because this all sounds like a foreign language to us, and it is. Take a look at the. Let's read the Mishnah Berurah first. Sif Katan Chav. And then we're going to read a very lengthy piece in the Be'er Halacha that is necessary for us to read. I have no other way of teaching this to you and explaining this thoroughly without reading the Be'er Halacha. But let's look at Chav in the Mishnah Berurah first. He writes, "Mitchilas hashkia," meaning.
What page, Rav? I'm sorry.
In my edition, it's Lamed Gimel, so it's Siman Reish Samach Aleph Sif Beis, and it's Sif Katan Chaf in the Mishnah Berurah. Do you see it there, Simeon?
Oh, you're in the Mishnah Berurah.
Yeah, Sif Katan Chaf. We're about to start it. Do you see her as a Dibra Maschil Mitchilas Shkia?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, I got it. Okay.
Good. So this whole concept, says the Mishnah Berurah, Das Rabbeinu Tam. This is all, as I've previewed for you in previous weeks, this is all the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, Visiaso, and his supporters, those who are in accordance with his opinion. The Svir Lahu the Shtei Shkiosei, who explain that there are 2 shkias. Mitchila nichse sachama me'einenu v'shokas. At the beginning, when we are not able to see the sun anymore and it has gone below the horizon, that's called the beginning of Shkia. Now, the next line is like you fall out of your seat if you've never heard this concept before. From the time that the sun is no longer visible, if you add 58 and a half minutes from that point, which is the equivalent of 3 1/4 meal, it is still day, according to Rabbeinu Tam.
It's important to note that the Techilas Hashkia, it is not dark out.
That's correct. It is. Well, it might be dark, but it is considered day.
Not necessarily.
Well, sorry. There is still light coming. Correct. Yeah. Meaning there's still light coming over the horizon.
But that clearly is not seis. It is not. You can't see stars.
So slowly, right? Slowly. The question that and the Gemara is going. We're going to deal with this question that Richie is bringing up, which is as it gets darker after the sun sets, stars do become visible. But the question is, what kind of stars? The Gemara will deal with. What kind of stars constitute the picture in the sky that now it is it's a siman that it is no longer the previous day for sure, and it is now for sure the next day, right? Bein hashmashos is when we're unsure, and so we're going to deal with the question of when is bein hashmashos in relation to shkia, when is it certainly the next day, undoubtedly. So for Rabbeinu Tam, the calculation is that it is still yom. 58 and a half minutes after the sun has set, which is a very surprising thing for our brains to wrap around. Ume'az ve'hala maschil hashkia hashnia. Once you hit 58 and a half minutes, 3 1/4 meal, then the second shkia, you hit the second shkia. Sha'az maschil ha'hishaka ha'or legamre. Then the light completely sets, not the sun, but the light. V'hu nikra sof hashkia, and that's called sof shkia, the end of shkia. V'nimshach zmana kedei shir mahalach shloshes rivei mil. Then you calculate another 3/4 of a meal. That's 13 and a half minutes. That one, at least I know by heart, Richie, because I've just memorized that one. Shehu elef v'chamesh me'os ama. It's the equivalent of walking 1,500 amot. Vehu bein hashmashos. That's considered twilight period. Bein hashmashos. It's not yet Vadai Laila yet, though, according to this
This is
opinion.
after the 54.
After the 58 and a half
wild.
minutes,
Has another 18.
Yeah.
13 and a half minutes is then Ben Hashmashos.
That's Ben Hashmashot.
But no, then for sure, even according to Rabbeinu Tam, you need to start Shabbos by then. Because Ben Hashmashos is Safek Yom Safek Laila. What's surprising is that he gives you 58 and a half minutes after Shkia to continue doing whatever you need to do to prepare for Shabbos.
There's 4 opinions about Ben Hashmashot.
Right.
Even Rabbeinu Tam.
Right. So for Rabbeinu Tam, it's 58 and a half minutes.
13 degrees.
After, right, exactly. It's or 13 and a half minutes is the standard opinion. 13 degrees, based on Rabbeinu Tam's calculation, in terms of the sun's position degree-wise, so geometrically where it is in the sky.
We have no way.
Um,
There's no way.
measure the degrees behind the horizon. Right. You could probably time out, the degrees based on. I bet you nowadays they can make that calculation. Probably in days of Rabbeinu Tam, they would never have been able to make that calculation. I don't know.
So according
But-
to Rabbeinu Tam, you have the 58 minutes plus the 13 and a half to start Shabbat.
No, 13 and a half is already Shabbat because that's Bein Hashmashot. Just like when the sun sets, the other opinion is going to say Bein Hashmashot starts right away. Because, there's some light coming through, but it's not clear. Is it day? Is it night? How do we define day versus night? There's a discrepancy a disagreement that will never be resolved on this issue. But we're just never sure. That's why it's called Bein Hashmashot. It's between the sun. It's some twilight period that we just don't know what the halacha calls it. I can describe it. I can say there's no sun visible over the sun's no longer visible. It's gone below the horizon. But for Rabbeinu Tam, it's 58 and a half minutes. Then I have to start Shabbos. Then those 13 and a half minutes of Bein Hashmashos, for sure, you have to already have started Shabbos. The Tosefes is anything in the 58 and a half minutes. Now,
Can
let
you
me
define what horizon is? I mean, if I'm in a flat prairie and hills on the other side,
I think
What
it's
about-
how we would define it today. That like if you go to any science, astronomical scientific website, you go to whatever you type in. It's when the sun is no longer visible.
okay. So it's,
The,
no, you
the
can't
reality
say
is that even if, let's say, you're in Denver and you're a mile high, the answer is that I believe Shabbos starts when it's not visible for you, right? Not when it would be at sea level in Denver. I believe that would be wherever you can't see it anymore. That is what now it's Shkia. Shkia means the sun is no longer visible over the horizon, and that's how he defined it, right?
No, I know, but what I'm saying is, if you're in a town or a city where the horizon isn't even from one side of the town to the other, because you have mountains on one side. I mean, what
so if you-
happens? Does everybody
so-
just do their own thing?
Yeah, I would assume that in one town it would be like over the horizon, not just like one person has a view of a mountain this way. That would be my assumption. I would need to double check that, but the idea is that like if you go on the weather app, it tells you exactly to the second what time sunset is in your location. But in theory, it's the same idea because that's the moment. If you ever look at the sky, I've only done it once in my life, which is a very sad thing. It's sunrise where I sort of looked on the exact calculation, and then I once watched the sun. It's like the first moment where it kind of peaks over the, ever watch that? It peaks over the horizon. That's sunset, and sunrise would be the same thing where it just disappears. But that would be the definition according to everybody, I think, according to all halachic opinions.
So where is the 13 and a half minutes further after? What's going on in that 13?
Safek Yom, Safek Laila.
But according to him, it's 58 minutes.
That's still
Shabbat
Yom.
starts.
No, it's still Yom.
No, 58 minutes after Shkia.
Oh, then it's Safek Laila, Safek Yom, Safek Laila, and everybody agrees that you have to start Shabbos by then. And whatever you define as Bein Hashmashos, you have to start Shabbos by then because it's a suffix whether it's Shabbos. So you can't. It's a suffix doraisa. Yeah. So
Why are we even talking about those 13 and a half minutes? If Shabbos starts after the 58 and a half,
so
what's
it
the
becomes most
significance?
relevant inyan what we talked about a few weeks ago. If you're caught in the middle of something we're like, oh, I don't know. It's Bein Hashmoshos. It's not. It's a twilight period, and now I forgot to do something and I have to ask a non-Jew. That's where it could be relevant, right? Where I have a little more wiggle room to do Amir al-Nochri, as opposed to when it's sort of for sure Shabbos already.
So.
And by the way, for Korbanos is relevant too, because well, you have to bring a chatas or not.
This little website here, gives you 4 different times for Bein Hashmoshos, 4 different opinions, and within each opinion there are several.
Yes, yeah. No, there's a lot to be. I want to give you the big opinions here. Yeah,
2 Jews, 5 opinions.
Most hold now when the sun sets, it's Bein Hashmoshos.
yeah. We're gonna get to the opinion that we all follow. I'm acknowledging that none of us do Rabbeinu Tam's opinion on the front end of Shabbos at the very least. And he says here, let's continue to finish this.
Excuse me, Rav.
Yes, yeah. Go ahead.
Did you suggest before that at the time of Shkia, when the orb of the sun is below the horizon, that Kochavim could be seen? Some could be seen?
Well, I'm not saying at that very moment. There is a time period between Shkia and Tzeisa Kochavim, where there are Kochavim. That's a very funny statement, because Tzeisa Kochavim.
If that's the case, then there is no such thing as Bein Hashmoshos.
So the question is not the question. The definition of Tzeisa Kochavim is the emergence of 3 medium stars. When it comes to Shabbos, on the back end of Shabbos, we're machmir because we're not sufficiently bakim. We're not well versed in how to determine what makes a medium star versus a small star, a medium star versus a large star, and therefore the psak halacha is that we wait until shlosha kochavim. Not sufficiently able to tell the difference between a small star and a medium star, so we wait till. So no, I'm always get this mixed up. We always wait till you can see 3 small stars, which takes a lot longer to see because there needs to be less light in the sky. And that's when we end Shabbos. Technically, by the letter of the law, Shabbos ends when there are 3 medium-sized stars. But we are not sufficiently bekim in what a medium-sized star is versus a large star. And therefore, since we might make the mistake and think, oh, that's a medium star, and really it's a large star, we might end Shabbos early. To take away the sphere, we end Shabbos when there are 3 small stars. This is why when there are some mitzvah that were, are deoraisa, like Shema, we also try to repeat it after 3 small stars to be sure that we did the mitzvah at the correct time of nighttime. However, when there is a mitzvah derabanan, we are not as machmir to wait till 3 small stars, because the whole thing is derabanan in the first. Because if the mitzvah is derabanan in the first place, and the whole thing is a fear that we might do it at the wrong time, well, it's derabanan, it's fine. Which is why in this shul we count Sfiras Omer before there are 3 large stars, 3 small stars. So I always get that mixed up. It's like from time I was like in Smicha, I learned all these things. Like for some reason the big and the little. Anyways, you have to wait till 3 small stars to end Shabbos. Let's finish this Mishnah Berurah, and then I want to read the Be'er Halacha, which will make all this amply clear. I know this is very confusing. And then 3 medium-sized stars emerge at the end of 13.5 minutes, shehem siman lilayla, which is the sign that it is night. And so we find, according to his opinion, Rabbeinu Tam's opinion, that from the beginning of Shkia until Tzeisa Kochavim, he arba'as milin, better known as 72 minutes. Ever hear people, you follow Rabbeinu, 72 minutes. That's where it comes from. It's from 4 meal, 18 times 4. And you see what we write, here he says, besamuch, it's coming up, sort of, that there are many poskim who disagree with this. And I will underscore and underline the word many. You'll see a list that is too long to enumerate, but for the Be'er Halacha, he will try to enumerate all of them. No, Ben Hashmasha starts right when you can't see the sun anymore. Shehu Sveik Yom Sveik Laila, because that's where there's a doubt that is a day or is it night. And that's going to be the opinion that we're familiar with. Now, on the back end of Shabbos, understand the people who are following Rabbeinu Tam are being machmir for Rabbeinu Tam's opinion in this argument, which on its surface would say that you need to wait, that you have 58 and a half minutes after the sun sets on Friday night to be doing malacha. They're not being makil for that side of it. So it's a funny thing when you say you're being machmir for Rabbeinu Tam. It's literal because they're only machmir for Rabbeinu Tam's opinion. They're not being makil according to Rabbeinu Tam's opinion, because that would be a very, very lenient opinion about when Shabbos starts. Now take a look at if you go to the left, Dibur Hamaschil Mitchilas Hashkia in the Be'er Halacha. It's 5 lines from where it starts to get wide in my edition. Everyone see that? I want to make sure everyone's with me on this one. I need to follow along. It's on the left-hand side now. The Be'er Halacha is on the left-hand side. I'm sorry, it's the smaller print. I don't know why they make the Be'er Halacha in every edition the smaller print.
It's to the right of the Mishnah Brura.
On this page, on Lamed Gimel, it's to the left.
Okay.
It's the outer one. It's always on the outer part of the page. It's Mitchilas Hashkia.
Further down, there's a little asterisk.
Yeah, there's an asterisk. There's no letters.
Keep going.
It's
Keep
about
going.
5 lines from where it starts to get wide.
There.
Okay, it's
Maybe
bolded
a little
bolded
lower.
words. Simeon, you got it over there?
See it?
No, but go ahead. I'll catch up. I'll follow.
5 lines up from where it starts to get wide on Lamed Gimel. The Dibra Maschil is Mitchilas Hashkia and the Be'er Halacha. So he says here, Ta'am l'chol zeh. What's the reason behind all this? Now he gives the Gemara background. That's what I wanted to show you. You have to understand the Gemara to really understand where Rabbeinu Tam could come up with such a wild opinion. Lichora. So the Hinei b'Psochim Tzadidal in Psochim 94. Isa the Mishkia Sachama Tzesa Kochavim Shir Dalet Milim. We get one data point. The Gemara there says that the time from the sunset to Tzesa Kochavim is 72 minutes. Is the distance to walk for meal. I want to also back up and just not back up. I want to add one fact here. That the assumption that's often made, or one of the reasons that you'll see like 10 different calculations made when you go to these, MyZmanim websites, sites like that, is because, well, how do I calculate 72 minutes on every single day? It's 72 minutes because we all know that things in the sky change from day to day, from season to season. Sometimes, some parts of the year, the time between the sun setting and the time it gets quite dark is shorter than at other times of the year. So, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It depends on depends on the latitude where you find yourself. It depends, right? So if you go to this time of the year to Edmonton, Alberta, where there's a Jewish community in Edmonton, or London, the sun will set, and the time between the sun setting and the time it really kind of gets dark in the sky is very long. Yeah, it's like it can be 2 hours. It can be some very lengthy period. But if you're closer to the equator, it's much shorter. So it also depends on where you are in the world. So a lot of the times, right? So a lot of times the assumption, by the way, is that what we're talking about is a day, is this theoretical day, not theoretical day. The day is the equinox. We make this calculation on the day of the equinox in the spring or fall, and you're in Yerushalayim. And therefore, how long would it take to walk 1,500 amot? And therefore, the calculation of what the sky looks like at that time, and that's why it comes like, the sun is 8 degrees below the horizon right now. Well, that will look very different 8 degrees below the horizon if you then go to Warsaw on the very same day as opposed to Jerusalem. So how do you calculate this? What the sun looks like at a certain point, in Yerushalayim, that may take longer in Poland. So just know that there are also different opinions about that. Well, some say, no, it's fixed 72 minutes. Just take the clock and you add 72 minutes no matter where you are. And some people say, no, that makes no sense. You should do it as a matter of degrees. What would it look like over there if I use 72 minutes to the calculation over here in Yerushalayim? So just know that there are degree calculations and fixed calculations that you'll see on these websites that have different opinions about how you calculate this zmanim. Whether you hold like Rabbeinu Tam or not, that's also a question. Ben Hashmashos, 13 and a half minutes, is that fixed or based on a degree calculation of what the sky would look like? It was similar in Yerushalayim as it is to here in Scarsdale.
You're up at the Arctic Circle in June. Sun never sets.
So it's a big question, right? If you go up to the Arctic Circle or you go to some northern parts of Alaska, maybe you take a cruise and you go to the northern parts of Alaska in the summertime, the sun never sets. In Anchorage, it sets. So if you're in Anchorage, you're okay. It's just at midnight. But if you go north in Alaska, the sun will not set for a certain amount of time in the summer. And by the way, contrast that in the winter, the sun never rises for a certain amount of time, and it's just always night. If you go some websites, I actually once looked this up. If you go to some websites, say whatever the star came, they say best not to travel to such places in the world because you'll end up with halachic problems. When is when to daven shachris, when do you daven mincha, when do you daven marv? It's like you're davening marv all day long. It's very confusing what you do. So if you go at a time of the year when the sun sets, I don't know. Anyways, so that's something important to keep in mind here. Is it a matter of degrees or is it fixed? It's not going to be discussed here. It's giving you the basic opinions, and then you can understand from there where some of the other divergent opinions come. Ube Shabbos, and then the Gemara in Shabbos says another data point. That from the beginning of Shkia, from Shkia, not beginning of Shkia, from Shkia, when the sun sets, begins Ben Hashmashos. Le Rabba, the Aliba, the Rabbi Yehuda, the Paskinan Kavase. According to Rabba, who follows Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, who we follow, who we paskin like. Amar Sham, the Meshech Ben Hashmashos, and over there it also says that the time of Ben Hashmashos, Tlosa Rive meal, 3/4 of a meal, Vacharka Chave Laila, then it's night. So you have 3 data points. That after that, when the sun sets, it is Ben Hashmashos. That Ben Hashmashos is 3/4 of a meal, and the time from Shkia till Tseis is 72 minutes. Tlosa means 3/4. Tlosa Rive meal. Plus is always 3.
Sorry, I lost your. What did you say about
13 minutes, right?
Right, correct.
What did you say about the 72 minutes after Shkia?
That there's one data point that from Shkia till Tseis, through the emergence of stars, is 4 meal, which we estimate to be 72 minutes, 18 times 4. Now, how do we put these data points together? V'amrinan Sham, and it also says over there, the Gemel Kochavim Beinonim, Shlosha Kochavim Beinonim, when there are 3 medium-sized stars, that's also nighttime. So you have another data point. That 3 medium stars equals night. Im kain kasha ahadadi. So now we have a question. There's a question on itself here.
Going back to one.
Yeah.
From Shkia till nighttime, 3/4 of a meal, 13 and a half minutes.
Yeah.
So 13 and a half minutes past Shkia
Past Shkia.
is night.
That's correct. That's how the Gemara says it, yes. 13 and a half minutes, or 3/4 of a meal past Shkia.
That's not how we define the end of Shabbos.
No, because we are machmir for, as I mentioned before, small stars, not medium stars. So if these data points have to line up, medium stars equals 13 and a half minutes. The problem is we don't know how to sufficiently tell what a medium star is from a big star, so we're machmir beyond that point. Okay. The Alkane. So the Ain Kane, Kasha Hadari, we have a question how to put these data points together. It's difficult. You have medium stars, 13 and a half minutes after this, and it says between Shkia to, right, so if you have from Shkia to Tzeis HaKochavim being 72 minutes. And on the other hand, Ben Hashmashos starts right away. You know what I'm saying? Ben Hashmashos starts right away, and I get 13 and a half minutes, and that gets me to Tzeis HaKochavim, and I have a problem. The Gemaras don't add up. I'll say that one more time. These Gemaras don't add up. This is where Rabbeinu Tom's going to come in. The Gemaras don't add up. One Gemara is saying Shkia starts right away after the sun sets, and then I know that the time between that and Tzeis HaKochavim is 13 and a half minutes. So it seems like one time place in the Gemara, nighttime is 13 and a half minutes after the sun sets. But wait a minute, the Gemara Psachim said it's takes 72 minutes from Shkia till Tzeis HaKochavim. So now I have a problem. How do I resolve this internal Gemara conflict about 13 and a half to 72 minutes? What happened with the 58 and a half minutes? This is a Rabbeinu Tam, his launching point. So that's why I wanted you to see this. He didn't come out of thin air. So take a look. Next part, just keep going on where we are here. V'alkein, Te'eretz Rabbeinu Tam on the first wide line here on this Be'er Halacha. Rabbeinu Tam answers V'siyaso and his supporters. L'chalek bein shkia sachama de psachim l'shkia sachama sheb'Shabbos sham. He says there are two shkias. Psachim is one shkia. Shabbos is another shkia. Shabbos meaning the Gemara Shabbos. Dahid psachim, the shkia in described in psachim, which was the 72 minutes between shkia and tzeis. Hu haschalas hashkia. That's the beginning of shkia. Mishkias guf hashemesh, when the orb of the sun sets, disappears. It is hidden from our eyes now. And then if you calculate from there till Tzeis HaKochavim, that would be 72 minutes for meal. When the sun setting, not in, I was breaking my head for about 10 minutes reading this, and I didn't even remember, like, oh, it's talking about the Gemara. I was like, when the sun sets on Shabbos, it's just talk about the Shabbos. No, he means the Gemara Shabbos, right. And I didn't figure that out for 10 minutes.
Is that Saturday night?
No. I was thinking that too, Simeon. He's talking about here. Misha Tishka Hachama Shabbos means the Gemara Shabbos. The Shkia described in the Gemara Shabbos, not. Oh, okay. Yeah, I had the same thing. I was like, what is he talking about here? So in the Gemara and Shabbos, that Shkia, Sham Hu Sof Shkia, that is the end of Shkia. Shehu Kishenishka Gam Or Hashemesh. That's when the light from the sun that's coming over the horizon also is disappearing. Meirov harakia, from the majority of the firmament of the sky. Levad litzad ha'ma'aravi, except for a little bit on the western side of the sky. So the eastern, if you were to stand outside at Tzeis HaKochavim, the Gemara describes that if you look to your east, it would be dark up the upper part of the sky and the lower part of the sky. If you look to your west, the upper part of the sky is dark. The lower part of the sky still has a little bit of red. And that's all, but a little bit. And that's how the Gemara describes Tzeis HaKochavim. So even Tzeis HaKochavim has a drop of something on that horizon over, on the western side.
So both Gemaras are really talking about 72 minutes.
Both Gemaras are really talking about 72 minutes. Yes. Yeah, Rabbeinu Tam's opinion is not as meshuga as it sounds when you read this. It just doesn't add up that Bein Hashmashos, that we don't consider Bein Hashmashos. What's hard for him is that Bein Hashmashos doesn't start right away.
Rabbeinu Tam says that Shkia is a 58 and a half minute period. The time the sun goes below the horizon. Right. Until the beginning, until Bein Hashmashos.
Right.
He says that's 58 minutes. Then Bein Hashmashos to Tzeis HaKochavim is about 50 minutes. That's 72 minutes. And this Gemara is saying the same thing. Because the assumption is that there is a 58 and a half minute time period of Shkia Sakama.
That's Rabbeinu Tam's solution, right? 58 and a half, that there's a Tchilas Shkia. He thinks that Shkia is a period. We're going to see that the Vilna Gaon and the rest of the Rishonim Kimat believe that Shkia is a point in time, is a moment in time, not a period. So that's going to be the big machlokas. Rabbeinu Tam thinks it's based on these two Gemaras that there's a period of time that's defined as Shkia, and everyone else is going to say no, it's a point in time, and they'll give their own clever solution to the math problem that we have here. They're going to have to answer to the math here. Okay, so now he says, continuing on here, ומאז מסקל בין השמשות שהיא גימל שלושה רבעי מיל קודם תzeis HaKochavim, and from that point, from Sof Shkia, right? So maybe I misdefined it before. Sorry, when it's tzeis HaKochavim, there's a little. Sorry, when it's the end of Shkia, according to Rabbeinu Tam, there's a little bit of light on the west. And then from there, Bein Hashmashos starts, and that takes 3/4 of a mil until you have the emergence of 3 medium-sized stars, until Teisa Kochavim, until the stars emerge. Me'aschalas Hashkia, therefore, from the beginning of Shkia, Shu Shkias Guf HaShemesh, that's when the sun rose below the horizon. Ad Sof Hashkia, until the end of Shkia, Haniskar Le'el, as we described before, Hu Yom, it's day. Do all the malacha you want, who cares? It's day.
The point is, it is not in Sveikut.
That's right. For Rabbeinu Tam, it is not a suffix. It is Yom. V'hu Meshech Gimel Milan Uravia. That is the 3/4 of a mil, or the 58.5 minutes. V'az Zman Hu Zman Tosefes Shabbos. That's all time that you could add to Shabbos. But you can only add to Shabbos if it's considered chol. It's weekday. It's day. U'kamoshe Kosav Kan b'Shulchan Aruch, as a Shulchan Aruch paskins. It's very fast. It's very, very, very interesting. The Shulchan Aruch of all paskins like Rabbeinu Tam, and you're going to see a whole list of other Rishonim who don't follow this opinion. And it is usually interesting because usually the Shulchan Aruch is a majority follower, but here he follows Rabbeinu Tam's opinion. Ubein kulam hema daled milim. So the time from beginning to end of this whole period, 7 is 4 mil. So we say 72 minutes. For those 72 minutes, it's not for sure night yet. For the last 13.5 minutes, it's maybe night, but it's not for sure night. So 72 minutes into what we call Shabbos, Rabbeinu Tam would say, that's not sure it's Shabbos. So, okay.
Again, this varies vastly by latitude and time.
For sure. You're right. You have to adjust that. Yes. Based on where you are and based on the time of the year. 100%. 100%. We are working with the sort of perfect day in Yerushalayim. Okay? Where we're on the equinox and everything is nice and clean. Zehu Shitas Rabbeinu Tam v'siyasa. That is Rabbeinu Tam's opinion. Now we understand where it comes from, at least. Whether you like it, you disagree, you think it's ridiculous, you at least understand where he's coming from. Okay, and by the way, he describes over there this idea of like that the sun sort of when it kind of I told you this last night. He sort of assumes that the sun has to kind of work its way through the thickness of the earth to get underneath the earth. That's what's going on during that sort of Shkia is this period where the sun is working its way through the thickness of the earth or the distance of that to get under the earth, and of course that's why it rises on the other side the next day because it travels underneath. This was the ancient world's belief. So I'm not making fun of Rabbeinu Tam. I'm just pointing out that's what everyone believed. But that's sort of what's happening during Shkia. Now, what about everyone else? Or not everybody else. Most other opinions. Take a look here. It says V'ayin lekaman Siman Shin Lamed Aleph Sifhei b'Magen Avram. Take a look later on in the Magen Avram and a later Siman Shabbos. Mashma Sham Shedato Lahalacha Kashita Zohar. Sorry, he paskins like Rabbeinu Tam. Okay, so Magen Avram, no small opinion, does side with Rabbeinu Tam on this whole issue. Now, Aval Hagra, Zal. Okay, the Zechron Lebracha, the Gra, the Vilna Gaon. Okay, he's a heavy hitter when it comes to the world of Ashkenazi Jewry. Cholek al Shitazo. He disagrees. Ve'erich bekama ra'ayos. He says he goes in a lengthy piece with many proofs. Dishkias achama shebeshabes le'inyan bein hashmashosu. Gam kein haschalas hashkia. The Shkia described in Maseches Shabbos, which Rabbeinu Tam had claimed was a later Shkia, is, according to the Gra, the same Shkia that was in Psachim. There's only a point in time for Shkia. Kemo Shkia Sachama Shebe Psachim Sham. Miyad Achar Shkia Skufa Shemesh Maska Ben Hashmashos. That there's one Shkia. And then after Shkia, that is immediately the time of Ben Hashmashos. Right, when the sun is no longer visible, that is Ben Hashmashos. Aliba the Rabbi Yehuda, the pasuk Rabbi Yochanan Kavasei Lechomer b'Shabbos Sham. Like if we follow the opinion in the Gemara Shabbos, of Rabbi Yehuda, who's is Rabbi Yochanan Paskins like him. Okay. Umeshach zman bein hashmashos, the time of bein hashmashos, who gimel shlosha rivei meal, 3/4 of a meal. Okay, so now you have this question: 3/4 of a meal into, or say past shkia, it's now considered night. The kushya hanizkar lahel. The question that, of course, been before, you have to answer it. What about all the math here, the hoops and loops of the math? Teretz. So the answer, the Vilna Gaon answers, lechalek bein tzeisa kochavim de Shabbos, letzeisa kochavim de Psachim. Here's the difference. You want to, Mr. Rabbeinu Tam wants to differentiate between. There are two definitions for shkia. Vilna Gaon says no, there are two tzeisa kochavims going on here. And that's how he differentiates here. There's a different tzeisa kochavim in Shabbos and a different one in Psachim. The tzeisa kochavim de Shabbos, the one described in Shabbos, which was a much smaller time period. Huzman shalayla shehu gimel kochavim bein onim. That's why it's 13 and a half minutes after Shkia, because it's describing 3 medium-sized stars. It says that Kochavim de Psachim, the one there that describes 72 minutes after the time of Shkia, who says Kol HaKochavim Hanirim Balayla, which is not even 3 small stars. 72 minutes is when it's completely dark. The sky has now fully emerged in its beauty, with all the stars. So 72 minutes after the sun sets, it is not a matter of determining, it's just it's describing how long until all the stars have emerged in the sky. And that would take 4 meal. Which is a much later time. That's 4 meal after the beginning of Shkia, approximately 72 minutes. Again, correcting for what Richie is saying before, where what latitude you're, that may also be, it's just what it would be. What would the sky look like in Yerushalayim or the equinox if you had walked walking for 72 minutes after Shkia? Great, that's what it would look like, and it would probably, by the way, if you think about the autumnal or the spring equinox, and you think about a day, in Yerushalayim around that time of the year, if you were walking for 70, if you walked the right amount of amot, and it was about 72 minutes later, it would be pretty dark. It would be dark. Okay, yeah. Yes, but it would be probably to the point where you probably would see all the stars in the sky. It would be a perfectly, there's no light left. Yeah, there's nothing left. There's no light at all. No light at all in the western sky. Now, so that's how Vilna Gaon deals with this. Now, it's important to understand here. Let's keep going. So the Afal Gav, right? The Afal Gav Shenir LeEinayim Shemeshach Ben Hashmasha Su Ad Seisa Kochavim Uharbe Yoser Mishlosha Rivei Mil. And even though it appears to our eyes that the time of Ben Hashmashos until Seis HaKochavim is more than 3/4 of a meal. He says, well, but sometimes during the years, whatever we're talking about, that's what we're talking about. Sometimes you're like, wait a minute, 13 and a half minutes. I don't see a star in the sky. I don't even see a shemet of a star in the sky, 13 and a half minutes sometimes on certain days. He says, the Gra explains, Shashir HaGemar Nemar Rak Al Ofek Bavel O Eretz Yisrael. It's talking about, the situation in Bavel or Eretz Yisrael. It's talking about a particular point in the world on a certain type of day. And then you have to extrapolate from there. He says, in our areas, our lands here, Poland, Shenote Yoser Lotzafo, we're more north. Misarech Yoser, it takes longer from the time that the sun goes below the horizon to see even 1 star in the sky, let alone 3 medium-sized stars. So, the end of Ben Hashmashos, which would mean it's nighttime. Ein lanu meshach zman siyum min hagamar al ofek shalanu. What it looks like in the sky in our neck of the woods. He says, it's not. We don't have exact time from the Gemara on our situation. The Gemara is talking about Eretz Yisrael or maybe Bavel. It's not talking about us in Poland. And by the way, Bavel is a modern day Iraq. It's closer to the equator, if I'm not mistaken, than Poland. So it's not exact. So therefore, 3 medium-sized stars is the true definition. I mean, wherever you are, 3 medium-sized stars is how you define the end of the day, or the beginning of the next day, I should say, or the end of Shabbos on Saturday night. We're talking to the Gemara about a time period that's talking about in Eretz Yisrael or Bavel, wherever their locale was. But for us, we can't rely on that. What we can do is make calculations, extrapolations based on, degrees of what the sun is like in one location, extrapolate out to another location. But we have to use the calculation of where you are on the earth to figure out that calculation. That would be a degree-based calculation. I don't know how they were doing that in Poland, before some of the, astronomical calculations that, science has been able to help us with. I know that those are not so new. I think that there were definitely formulas that helped calculate certain ways, charts, whatnot, but it's not to the precision that we certainly have today, where you can go on your phone and you can get everything to the second about what's happening, in any latitude in the world. Sorry, Simeon, you were saying something. I'm sorry.
No, I said that irrespective of the computations, the 72 minutes or whatever, he's basing it on the actual physical sighting of the 3 medium stars finished.
Correct. And the other things that I mentioned in the Gemara they're relevant to a particular location. That's correct. So, all right, let's just finish up here with 2 more sentences, and then we're going to stop. So he says here, aval lo gedolim, right? We're not talking about big stars. We're not experts, sufficient experts. What's a medium star? What's versus a large star? We wait until we have the small stars. Look in the sky. You'll probably can tell there's been you'll probably know what a small star is when you see one. They're small. I wonder if the large stars, if they were probably the planets. That would be my hunch, that they were probably other planets. I know that they understood quite like we did about the solar system, that they're planets versus stars, things like that. But I'm not sure what they mean by a medium-sized star. What's a medium star? What's a small? So that's where, because we don't know what they meant. It's like maybe in the Gemara, they were having discussions. They were looking out the window. They were outside. Yeah, that one, but that's a medium one. I don't know what they meant. Nobody knows what they meant. So therefore, we wait till a small star, which is, again, you look in the sky, you know what a small star is. Small star is a small star. It's the ones that are hard to see, and you need more darkness. And that's why we have a chumrah about the end of Shabbos. Sorry, I lost myself. Kamosh Kosov with Simon Reish Tzadi Gimel, which I think talks about the laws of Dala, if not mistaken. Right when the sun goes below the horizon, that is considered ben hashmashos. That is his opinion. One more sentence. Uva emes, just to give you a flavor of this. In truth, shita so zos lav chadashay. You think the Vilna Gaon's opinion was such a novel idea? Not so much. Why? The kvar hiskim came b'shuvas maharam alashker. The maharam alashker was he's not as well often cited authority, but he is, I believe, an Achron. I don't think he's a Rishon. Maharam alashker says this in Simon Savibav, his work. The miyad achar shkia skufa shemesh have ben hashmashos gamor. He says, like Rabbi Vilna Gaon, behaving sham shekain kosvu b'perish hagaonim harishonim b'tshuvosayim. By the way, seems that was the opinion of the Gaonim. These are the rabbis who predated the Rishonim. Right? These are the rabbis who were, in the years 8, 9, 100. That's quite early authorities. The Hema, Reb Shrira Gaon, Reb Hai Gaon, Reb Nisim Gaon. Remember, I told you there's going to be a whole list here. Begam Harav Rabbi Avraham Chassid Benoshel Rambam. the Rambam's son had this opinion. Zal, Gam Kasav Sham, Shekain Mashma Meharif Harambam Varashi. He says, I believe that the Rif and the Rambam and the Rashi had this opinion as well. Ayin Sham Hevi O Hashach Lahalacha, the Shach, who's the Siftei Kohen, the side of the you can find his opinion on the side of the Gemara of the Shulchan Aruch in the Yoredeya. Lahalacha Bioredes and Reish Samavav Sif Katan Heud Aleph Lein Milas Ben Ashmashos the Ayin O the Perish Maharal Bach. Al Perach Beis Mehilchos Kiddush HaChodesh LaHarambam B'dir Masach Klal HaOla. He also agrees Shekasal Sham Gam Kein Meharif Rambam Mashma Disfir Hudunes Al Asashke. It sounds like the Rif and the Rambam also held like the Vilna Gaon's opinion. The Hainu Hacham Niskasa Me'einenu B'Havi Ben Ashmashos V'Gam Maharal MePrag B'Chidushav. The Maharal MePrag also had this opinion. On his opinion, his parish on Shabbos, parish Gam Kemish Mamash Kashitas Rabbi Hagra Hanizka V'Gam Hara Avan Spir Leikain. The Ravan also agree with the Vilna Gaon's opinion. The Kedeicha Keshanishka Gufa Hashemesh Niskasa Me'ein Miras Ben Ashmashos Ayin Hagos Lizar Kedas. Sorry, Hagos Mordechai, Perak Beis, the Shabbos. The Gam Sefer Seder Hazman, the Seder Hazmanim, Herichu Pasach Halacha Lamasa Karagra. I can keep reading here. The Yan Achar Haskal Ashashkia Have Ben Ashmashos. So you have literally the world against Rabbeinu Tam. Literally the world against Rabbeinu Tam. Also the heavy hitters. Rambam, Rashi, Rif. It's not like you have the Vilna Gaon, the Ravan, you name the Sefer, the Gaonim against him. So therefore, it says, you have to start Shabbos when the sun goes down. Like you can't ignore 50 Rishonim and the Gaonim and just say like, oh, well, there's Rabbeinu Tam said. You can't ignore that. That kind of majority is not one that you could ignore. You cannot do malacha at that point. You should be makel against so many Rishonim and Gaonim and whatnot. Who's fake Isser Skila. We're talking about the potential for a Deoraisa violation that comes with the penalty of the death penalty of stoning. The Das Kol Hane Ravavasa. You're going to go against these majority opinions, which would say you get Skila. Because 30 minutes after the sun sets, that's Skila according to most opinions. And Rabbeinu Tam's like, it's fine, you can do whatever you want. You can't be lenient like that. And in particular, which is not true in our day. We know exactly when Bein Hashmashos, but 100 years ago, they didn't open the newspaper even and say, oh, today is, I know when I grew up, you didn't have your phone, but the paper said exactly when the paper would tell you exactly when it was going to be Shkia. Everyone needs to be machmir here. I wouldn't even call it a chumrah. Lifrosh be malacha mitchilas hashkia. It is the Gemara. Even though the Shulchan Aruch, the next sif is going to say, yeah, you should stop doing malacha on the next, even though he passed him like Rabbeinu Tam. But lav daf in Shabbos is not just what any Shabbos is. Anything that's a Torah matter, you have to do this. Nafkamina Yereim. All right, we'll stop here. The Yereim thing is going to take us a little afield. We'll take a look at that in a moment. He's actually going to be more machmir than Shkia. He's going to say you need to start Shabbos before Shkia. I don't want to get into the Yereims. That's the individual opinion. We'll talk about it next week. So bottom line is what we saw this week. So we saw an opinion. We saw where Rabbeinu Tam comes from, and we also saw the other opinion, which is that Pesach Kochavim has a different definition in two Gemaras. And what we saw is that really everybody disagrees with Rabbeinu Tam. And therefore, even the Mishnah Berurah here makes it very clear you cannot be lenient for Rabbeinu Tam's opinion on the front end. On the back end of Shabbos, you want to do whatever you want. You want to follow the 72 minutes. It's okay. Do what you want. I will add, though, that there could be an ironic twist to that. Rabbeinu Tam may actually be more lenient in some very northern places in the world where the sun does set at a certain point on Motzei Shabbos. But if you use a 72-minute fixed calculation, it would be earlier, which is why you have to be very careful when you use Rabbeinu Tam as a fixed calculation, because that would again render a kula at the end of Shabbos when you're in a very northern part of the world in the summertime, not so north that it doesn't set, but that it sets at a very lengthy time after, where it gets fully dark, a very lengthy amount of time after Shkia. So you have to be very careful about how you use these opinions. You probably do need to take into account, it would make the most sense to take into account the latitude, because it comes down to, are there 3 stars in the sky? Are there 3 stars?
So we're going to end Shabbat 72 minutes after 3 stars.
If you use a 72-minute calculation, well, no, that's only Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam holds 72 minutes is Tzeis HaKochavim.
No,
The 72 minutes.
But 72 follow Rabbeinu Tam, so also follow Yitzhak Shabbat. So the
Yes.
question is, when is Yitzhak Shabbat according to Rabbeinu Tam?
72 minutes after Shkia.
So
That's when Rabbeinu Tam would say Shabbos is over.
So it basically is
Because that's already after Ben Hashmashos.
Everyone else. If it's,
What was that?
do we hold here Shabbat, for example, and after Shkia 72 minutes is the start we have, right?
Right.
3 stars. So he is basically starting late, but he's
Well, no. We would say that 72 minutes after Shabbos is over. We would say, if you follow the Gra, the Gemara was saying that's Tzeis Kol HaKochavim. All the stars, the small, in the really, really tiny ones too, the ones that like you can barely, because if you ever, I once went on a trip with the school 2 years ago to the middle of no man's land for a camping thing at night in Connecticut. Boy, it was a clear night, and you could see a lot more stars than you can see out here in Scarsdale at night. If you look up in a clear night here in Scarsdale, you can see a lot of stars here, a clear night, but it is a very different when you go camping and you get a clear night. So there are definitely a lot more stars. That's what I think. When I saw that, I said, that's Tzeis Kol HaKochavim. That's, you can see like, the whole expanse of everything. And that's 72 minutes after Shkia. Rabbeinu Tam would tell you, no, 72 minutes after Shkia is when it's 3 medium-sized stars. That's what he would tell you. Sit on this now a little bit. Let these 2 opinions kind of, take root and take hold. But now you're holding, and when people say, "Oh, I hold Rabbeinu Tam," now you know what it means. And then you could kind of, give a little jab to say you hold it on the front end of Shabbos also. Yes. So that's this discussion. We'll finish at that little point, and then I want to go back to the previous Be'er Halacha just to give you again more really understanding of some of these topics that we're dealing with. Then we'll continue forward from there, and we'll talk about when to light candles, and then it'll be a discussion about how much before Shkia you should light candles. That will become a funny opinion, because if you hold like Rabbeinu Tam, that's the